Hi, welcome to another video, and this one is basically me outlining what I'm going to be using going forward as a reviewing policy, so to speak, around titles. I guess it's partly my ASD that's driven me to produce this, so I just want to talk through what I'm going to be using as a kind of ranking criteria, and then give an example of 3 recent titles just to give you an idea of how it's going to work. So first thing I just want to lay out is all of this is going to be my own views based on my own experience with the titles in question, and should be taken as just that. You may well disagree in some or even all of the areas that I look at, and that's perfectly understandable. These scores are also representative of how a title stands at this point in time when it's being reviewed. So, it's a snapshot in time, so to speak. Now, I don't intend to provide a total overall score of ranking, because different people are going to have different needs when they pick up a title. So, for example, if a large amount of accuracy to a particular motorsport discipline simply isn't high for you as an individual, the score in that area is largely irrelevant. So what I would suggest is that if you take the areas that are important to you and use them to get to your own final score for a title if you want to. But as I say, I'm not going to be providing one. So what areas am I going to be looking at in terms of this? So the first one is driving simulation, and this is going to be dominated by the physics side of how vehicle dynamics and tyre models are recreated. It would also include the implementation of force feedback to communicate what's happening with the physics engine and the tyre model, as well as differing weather conditions, whether the track rubbering in and changing track conditions are also factored into the driving simulation. So it's going to take in all of those kind of areas. You've then got the racing simulation side of it, and this will be rating the quality and awareness of the AI, as well as how well balanced it is across various types of vehicles being raced, and also how varied the pack's ability is and how scalable it is for users. We then have motorsport simulation, and this one is made up of how well real-world motorsport disciplines are recreated. And now in some cases it can be very focused, such as in the F1 series or WRC series or ACC. Or it can be more of a sandpit environment, so things such as Project Cars 1 and Project Cars 2. It's mainly perceived around requiring the correct use of vehicles, tracks and stages, and regulations in there as well. We've then got accessibility, so how varying needs are catered for in terms of the audience. Are a good number of well-implemented driver aids included? Is the title control pad friendly? Does the difficulty scale well? And, if applicable, is the structure and rules of the racing explained well and covered? We've then got content, and simply put, that's how much stuff does it have in it? The range of tracks and vehicles, is it a singular focus, or does it take a more sandpit approach? How widely can the content be used? So, for example, can you take any car up Pikes Peak, as you could in Sebastian Loeb Rally, or is it locked to only some of the content, such as in Dirt Rally? Finally, we've got value. What is the initial price? Does it come with the season pass from day one? How much of the future DLC is chargeable? And is it recharging for content that's been recycled from previous titles? Now, that's how it's going to be ranked. What I tend to do when it comes to reviewing titles is have a multi-step approach. And some of this is down to the fact that I don't get early access from publishers. I go out and buy these titles myself, or in the day of digital downloads I sit at home and buy these titles myself. So I don't have the luxury of having a week or two's early access to a title provided by a publisher or developer. So I'll take an initial look and put a video up around that. It's normally done a day or two after launch, and this will cover the initial impressions of the title. It won't look to rank any of what I've just covered, as it's too early to do that, and it's mainly used for getting an initial feel and a view of a title and communicating that to you guys. Try and do this for all of the main or interesting titles on PS4 I can manage, but as I say, as I have to fund these myself, I can't cover everything. We'll then have a full review, which I normally do around about a week to 10 days after launch, to give time for the scale and the scope of the title to be experienced. And I do, after all, have a day job and a family, so I can't get those out quickly. This will use the ranking scale to provide a more balanced view of the title, and depending on the title, this may be the first review if I wasn't able to pick it up at launch. I'd then also like to try and put out DLC and update reviews, so provide short reviews on the updates and the DLCs for as many titles as I can. For minor updates, I'll put these in a weekly roundup on the channel rather than dedicate a full video to, a tiny bug fix change and things like that. And then a post-DLC review. Now, I'll re-review a title once all of the DLC, if that's applicable, and all of the updates are in. As in this day and age, titles change quite considerably over the first 6 months to a year. So I like to try and come back once all of that's out of the way and see how it looks at that point in time compared to what it looked like at the time it went to launch. So that's how the ranking system's going to work. Let's take a look at 3 titles that I've recently reviewed and let you know how they score in terms of this. Okay, so the first of the 3 titles I want to look at is F1 2020. So, very recent release. So in terms of driving simulation, I gave this one a 7, mainly because it continues to build on the previous year's titles, resulting in a good balance of approachable realism in regard to the driving simulation. Racing simulation, I gave an 8 to this. It's got a good solid AI with good track awareness, and it's happy to fight with both you, the player, and each other. And it's got a good range of skill levels available to it in terms of the AI as well. Motorsport simulation, about as close to offering every element of the sports as possible to get, yet it still manages to remain an accessible package. So I gave it a 9 for that. Accessibility, I gave an 8. It's got a really good range of accessibility options, caters to a wide range of the player's experience. The only thing it really requires the player to bring is a love of Formula 1 and a degree of knowledge of F1 itself, although an awful lot of it is explained within the title, so it does work extremely well in that regard. Content-wise, I gave this a 5, mainly due to the fact that it's limited to the current F1 field, last year's F2, and a range of F1 classics. However, some of those F1 classics are locked behind a paid DLC or premium launch editions of it, so it is reduced in terms of content in that regard. And value, unfortunately, this one gets a 6, so it's a low score as well, following the Codemasters' traditional mould of locking some content away behind premium launch editions and paid DLC, and also offering perks like early access for those wishing to pay more. So you combine that with the understandable limited content due to the nature of the title, it really does potentially limit the value it offers to those people not invested in F1 as a sport or a series. So F1 2020 effectively good on the driving, racing and motorsport simulation, good on accessibility, let down by content and value. Okay, so that's F1 2020. The next one I want to talk about is ECC, Assetto Corsa Competizione. So it's got an excellent physics and tyre model in terms of the driving simulation, and it takes a step above even the level of AC itself. And when you combine that with the dynamic weather and time of day, it makes for what is, in my view, the most accurate and realistic driving simulation on console to date, which is why I give it a 9 in that regard. In terms of racing simulation, it got an 8 here. It's got really impressive AI, great awareness of both the player and each other, and they will race accurately with each other. Oddly, one of the most impressive aspects of this awareness is when it comes to blue flags, when you're passing back markers. So this is an area that's forgotten about in a lot of AI logic, but they react really well and really realistically in ACC. It's only really let down by the lower AI count on console, which can make the longer races really lonely places at times. Motorsport simulation gets a 9. It is an unremittingly accurate depiction of the series, down to the actual track and weather differences between each of the 2 seasons are offered. It's only really let down by the unrealistically short stints of the longer events. even when you've got the event scale back to the shorter durations. In fact, it's mainly at its worst when it comes to that. In terms of accessibility, it got a 4, because being perfectly honest, it's unfortunately a title that does little to make this motorsport discipline accessible. Despite having a short tutorial in the career mode, large amounts of the particulars of the discipline are not explained to you, and if you don't know, for example, things such as the pit limiters only activate in first gear, you're potentially going to feel really overwhelmed by this. Pad control is better than the original AC, but that's a low benchmark to beat, in all honesty, so accessibility only gets a 4 in. Content, it gets a 5. It's got 24 cars and 11 tracks in the base title, so even the free for pre-orders Intercontinental GT pack, which adds 4 more tracks to it, does little to change the fact that it's a title that is light on content, without a shadow of a doubt. Value, though, I gave it an 8, because whilst it is low on content, and some of that's due to the nature of discipline it's recreating, the title does get a bump here because it was put out at launch at a budget price. So in the UK that was £35, which is a really good price for a title of this type. So this one, if you look at the radar diagram, biased towards the driving, racing and motorsport simulation side of things. Value peaks up a bit, but content and in particular accessibility let it down. And then finally, I want to look at an arcade title, and that's Ultimate Racing 2D. So in terms of driving simulation, it got a 1. Mainly because it's not a driving sim, and aside from some of the types of vehicles being more tail happy than others, you're not going to find a deep and detailed simulation model here. That said, did you really expect to? Racing simulation, I gave it a 5. It offers a good range of difficulties via a slider, meaning it does cater for a range of players. It's functional enough to make mistakes and be aware of each other and the player, but functional is about how I would describe it. Motorsport simulation, I gave it a 4, because surprisingly it does offer qualifying, tyre wear, dynamic weather and pit stops. And yeah, they may be done in a basic manner due to the arcade nature of the title, but this does add to the depth and replayability of it. Then accessibility, a whopping 9 here. At the end of the day, it's a top-down racer with a really wide range of AI settings. It's about as accessible as it can get in that regard. Plays great with the gamepad, obviously has no idea what a wheel is. Content, another 8 on this one as well. 35 racing classes, 45 tracks, many of which are faux real-world ones. Some massive career and championship mode provides a huge amount of content to get to grips with. There really is a lot in there. And value, I give it a 10, because quite frankly, at £8, it really does offer excellent value for money. Given the sheer amount of content it offers, even as a top-down racing title, you know, it really is a good little title in that regard. Now, interestingly, and this is why I don't want to give final scores for things, you'll notice, or rather overall scores for things, you notice how much this gets biased towards the value, content and accessibility, you know, with the driving simulation, racing simulation and motorsport simulation, both all three of them being considerably lower. That doesn't make this a bad title. It's just a way of comparing different titles. In fact, I'd strongly recommend you get Ultimate Racing 2D. It's just stupidly good fun in that regard. So that's 3 examples of how I'm going to be reviewing things from now on. Hopefully you found this interesting and you like the idea. If you do, please do hit the like button. If you want to see more content like this, or rather see this content be put into application, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be informed when new content turns up. Thanks very much. Take care.